time gets on, we tend to lose that sense of magic, and I think it's important to remind yourself of that the whole time.
Jacyln Bethany's here. Make some noise. Also, one of the stars and co-writer, Greta Bellamachina. Take a seat, guys, and there's a mic. And the lovely Amber Anderson. Oh my God, I so didn't get the dress code. Okay, it's so lovely to have you here at Genesis for this special screening. I'm going to come to you first, Jacyln. The film's been in the world the last few days. You've been doing Q&A sessions. You had your premiere. How are you feeling?
I mean, good. I'm just happy to be here. I think, you know, you make a film and you don't know what will happen, so it's very special that it's been able to be seen on the big screen, because nowadays everything is sort of gone to streaming and smaller platforms, and so it feels very special that we're able to share this in the way that it was meant to be seen.
For me, it's definitely about female friendship. Greta, I know you co-wrote this, and you guys are great mates, and I'm just wondering, what was the biggest challenge when you all sat down and thought, I want to do this?
I mean, Jacyln at the time was living in Mississippi and I was in Kent. And so we had this amazing writing situation where I would wake up in the morning and write 10 pages. And then when Jacyln woke up, she would read them and then write 10 pages and maybe delete a few things. Then I would read them and then we'd kind of argue in between. And then I'd wake up and then rewrite her pages. So essentially we were kind of writing round the clock, which was which was kind of interesting, but it meant that we had this creative dialogue going continuously, but never really at the same time.
And we wrote it pretty fast, but I think we refined it, and I think Amber came on pretty soon after we had a draft. You know, our different sort of perspectives and eyes on things really complemented each other and like made it come to life.
Well, I think the connection definitely comes across because everything sits so beautifully. It could have just got lost, like too much style, no substance, but you managed to do it so beautifully. Amber, I've recently watched you in Peaky Blinders and I loved you in that, by the way. Listen, you take on Scar. She's finding herself. She's also true to who she is and she's in love with Joe, who's about to get married. So how do you even go about becoming this character?
I didn't really have to think about it that hard because I think we all have experienced that first love where just nothing ever really feels like it ever again. And, you know, I grew up with my best friend since I was 11 and she now lives in Australia, and we have these long periods of time where we don't see each other. And we have a very different dynamic to Joe and Scarlett, but like, I really, really know what that feels like to kind of come back together after a long period of time. And sometimes you do just feel differently about certain things that happened, and that's kind of sad, but also beautiful.
It is. Happy Pride Month as well, and I think this film is perfect coming out this month. Jacyln, I think you and I had a bit of a chat at the premiere, and I said to you, Kate Blanchett recently said at Cannes Film Festival that when she arrives on a set, there'll be 50 crew members, and often there'll be 2 or 3 women. Your set, however, was a complete opposite. What did that feel like? Did you have a moment, for all of you actually, when you looked around and thought, this is not something we see every day in our workplace?
I mean, I think, you know, it was special because it was the people that responded to the story, and many of those people were women, but I also think it was, you know, supported by some great men as well. But I think it was a pretty organic, supportive environment, and I definitely felt supported as a director, because, you know, I've done projects where I have had to, you know, and I think it was kind of just like a natural, beautiful environment, and I think we all were committed to telling the story, and I think that it was such a female-led cast as well, so that sort of like helped set the tone.
I have to also say, independent film is such a cool thing to say. And I go to the festivals and everybody wants to be there. But in reality, it's hard work. Greta, give us an inside look into what it's really like to make a film independently.
I mean, this film really, every single person was so integral to it because, you know, we shot this in a really short amount of time and for like less than $100,000, which is kind of unheard of in filmmaking, because it means that everybody who's getting involved is kind of doing more than one job. The location is actually my house. So you have to have creative ways of figuring things out.
Greta had worked with the camera company before on her first feature that ended up providing us with the equipment and the crew, which are they're the only, I think, female-led camera equipment rental company in the UK. They're called Emmy-winning. So there were just little things like that where everybody was sort of chipping in, and because it was a short window, as Greta said, people were able to commit. Because if you have a 3-month shoot or something, it becomes more difficult, and people,
And I think you can be more creative when, of course it would be great to have more money, but I think, when you're filming it very quickly and you've only got a certain amount of time and you can only keep the crew for that amount, you're having to think of unique ways of making things work, and you're looking at the script again and again, and you're thinking, right, could we shoot this over there so we don't have to move the camera to a different room, which would take up more time.
I also think that when talking about indie film, people often talk about the constraints and the difficulties and the reasons it was challenging, but I also think that there's a world in which making an indie film can be more personal and more about friendship and more about actually taking care of people. And I remember, I might be paraphrasing this terribly, but on the first day, I think it was you, Jacyln, and Rob, who produced it, sort of stood up, and it wasn't like a speech as such, but they basically just said, welcome to the film, we're very aware this is probably going to be a bit of a shit show at certain moments, but please, if anyone has any issues, come to us. You're not going to get into any trouble for saying something. And that meant a lot to me. I've been on lots of much bigger sets where no one's ever said anything like that. And so I think, yes, there are constraints and there are difficulties, but actually, the fact that there was a smaller crew and the fact that we were filming it in this one house and that we were such a tight little band of people meant that you kind of had to take care of each other in a way that isn't always prioritized.
Do you remember?
How could I forget? We shared the same dream.
You have any rules? Don't go to my wardrobe, because I'm obsessed with your wardrobe. Was it don't take any of my clothes, anyone?
Do you know what? You just kind of have to surrender to it. I think it was kind of.
I mean, she has 2 kids that had to be. So this is kind of funny, but her. Do you want me to tell this story?
Tell it now.
Okay.
Too late.
Well, I think that her father, who has also contributed a beautiful song or cover to the film, but we had to get the kids out of the house for a certain amount of hours, so they ended up going to the pub every day for a couple after school for a couple of hours and coming back when we wrap. I mean, it's very sweet, and so that's what I mean by everybody sort of pitching in and being.
I think we also went to the pub at some point.
Well, listen, we haven't got much time, but I really want people that have come out today. Thank you so much for coming and supporting the film, to get the chance to ask you a question.
For me, what I wanted to ask was, we talk a lot about the challenges for women in the film industry, and I think I'm more interested in hearing your perspective on what made you feel the most empowered.
I was actually really inspired by Greta and Jacyln, because I think I'd had a bit of a weird gap before this job came along because of COVID and loads of other things. And I'd sort of gotten into that space of feeling I'm just constantly waiting for somebody else to give me permission to do my job and tell me that I'm allowed to be an actor now. And it just felt so fucking depressing, sorry. And then Greta came along with this script, and I just was so inspired by her and Jacyln's kind of, it is this word urgency. There's just this sense of, we can just make things, and we won't have loads of money, but we'll make it and it will be beautiful. And I think that really inspired me to kind of go on in my own career and go, you can just get together with friends and make really cool stuff.
When you're kind of cross-cutting between past and present, and it kind of crescendos in this beautiful way as they're having this kind of mirrored conversation, I was just wondering where the idea for that came from, and was it a very personal thing, because it just felt so true to where the characters were at in their life as a goodbye, and I just really, it stuck with me. I just wanted to know where that kind of came from.
Jack.
To me, the film is sort of in 3 acts. The first act is you're sort of introduced to Joe and Scarlett. The second act is all the other girls come and we're sort of in the hen party, and the third act kind of starts with that scene in the bedroom where she's smoking and they're sort of talking intimately. And I think we sort of had built up the sort of flashback structure throughout the film. And so the ending needed to feel like both worlds were coming together in a way. And I think like the way we did that was through that sort of nostalgic game where they played it as teenagers and then they played it as adults. So it felt like a pretty natural sort of back and forth because it was also happening in the present and the past. And I think with Greta and Amber playing as well, the teenage versions of it, there was this sort of acceptance of like, you know, who they were, and it's kind of all made sense as to their characters then and now. We have that sort of like very sweet music and like emotional music that accompanies it. So I think it was just sort of bits and pieces also that we had shot throughout the filming process that we didn't necessarily use, that we sort of put in there to sort of like wrap up their relationship. And it's very tender, and I don't think that movies really end like that very often.
I think, sorry to interject, but I think there was this idea where when we were writing it that you see in real time a sort of bittersweet love letter play out. So it's almost like you see Joe and Scar at the beginning and it's almost just them, and you don't know maybe if Joe wants to get back with her, and there's kind of this open-endedness to it. And then you see in sort of the flashback versions the kind of real love letter, that teen innocence that kind of, you know, is lingering. And it's kind of, in a film, even though they never end up together, in real time it's kind of this sort of love letter to them as friends and kind of each other. So it's sort of, I guess, trying to hold on to that melancholy was important.
I can't believe you're getting married.
Cheers.
Individually, starting with you, Amber, what one bit of advice would you give? Because I said to you at the premiere, you know, people think you guys are living the best life, you're in these beautiful gowns, but this is hard work and there's so many no's, but something keeps you focused and driven and keep going. So what is that for you that hopefully other people can get a bit of inspiration from?
I mean, I can only really speak to acting, but I think auditioning is such a funny thing. I think it's like a skill to be good at auditioning as well as being a skill to be good at acting. And I think the thing I always try to remember myself of is like, you're the expert in the room at the thing that they need. And I think it's very easy to go into an audition and feel like you're being kind of put to a test and that it's whether you're wrong or right. But you're walking into a room of casting directors and assistants and producers, but none of them can act, and you are the person that they are hoping will like solve a problem for them, and their problem is they need to fill this part. And I'm massively badly paraphrasing Bryan Cranston's acting advice, but I really do think that helps, you know, and so I think that's what I always try to remind myself of.
And Jacylyn, for you as a director, as a writer, also an actor, what bit of advice would you share?
I mean, it's hard. I think just to kind of keep going and to do it, because it's a very difficult industry, and I think you have to be in it's silly to say industry, but I think you have to be in it for the right, you have to love what you do so much and you can't see yourself doing anything else, because it is not easy, and like there are a lot of things that I was very naive about in a lot of ways, and you have to kind of learn and grow quite quickly. And I think just being thrown into the challenges and not being afraid is sort of, I guess, the advice that I would give.
And I'm going to embarrass you a little bit. This lady is like magical. We met years ago at Rain Dance Film Festival, and she reached out to me, said, look, I'm doing this film. And then I said, oh, I'm trying to do my own screenings. And she said, well, how can I help? And one thing it made me realize is you can't do this alone, guys. You need people to do this with. You need your tribe. And sometimes it's hard, but people reach out and you take the hand because it helps. Like today we're doing this, which is amazing. Greta, you are effortless and you always seem like you're full of joy. And I know there's going to be tough times as well, but you definitely are doing things your way. So I'm really curious to know where that comes from and what advice you would give also.
Well, thank you. I mean, yeah, we met, I think it was
Rain Dance.
Rain Dance. I had my first feature film, Hurt by Paradise, and it was there, and we met on the red carpet. And we had this really great chat, and I'd followed your work ever since. And I just thought you had such an eloquent way of talking about cinema and film and talking to people. But I think ultimately we're all dreamers, and I think we all have a sense of what we want to say, and we all have to kind of, I think it's important just to be kind to yourself and remember that, you know, of course it's great to have all these big things, but just putting a pen on the paper, or just reaching out to someone and saying, do you want to collaborate, making a few mistakes. I think, like you say, it's about having a creative community, because I think you can't do it alone. And I think when me and Jacyln met, I think it was just over 10 years ago, and I was lucky enough to be in some of Jacylyn's very early films when she was at AFI, at the film school in America, and it was hugely inspiring to me because I was there as an actor watching her make her first feature film in like the shortest amount of time ever, shooting through the nights, sort of like the actors were also working behind the camera in the scenes as extras, as you know, and just seeing someone so fearlessly just say, right, we're doing this. And so, you know, it's sort of,
Thank you.
It's kind of, you've just got to surround yourself with people who want to.
Yeah, I think that's why we're kind of sitting here, as well as like because of the support that we have shown each other as friends and collaborators, and you know, are so lucky that so many people have supported us on journeys together and journeys separately, and we're greatly inspired by each other, and are so, like, you know, lucky that Amber came on, and so much of our amazing cast, and hopefully it can, and crew, and you, Max,
Thank you. Back at you.
and hopefully it can inspire others to sort of just create work.
And shout out to your DP, Irene. Oh my goodness, what a vision. Amber, Jacyln, Greta, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out and doing this evening. The film is beautiful. I wish you so much success with it.
I do have one last thing to say. If you like the film, please tell your friends, family, anyone, you know, post
I heard
about
it's going to be streaming on loads
July
of platforms.
1st. So
amazing.
Yeah, and in cinemas in the UK until the 6th.
Time after time, the color of light cannot be the same. You always tell me
This all feels so special. All the women I love in one room.
is silent and still, but you are not around me.
I know we both find it hard to say our feelings. When I'm not with you, it hurts. I want to spend every day like this together.